Hello and welcome to the Lens at 177, and today we have the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Professor Biman Prasad, joining us ahead of the National Economic Summit that starts tomorrow. Professor Prasad, thank you for speaking to us. The first question for you is, with the Economic Summit, are you trying to achieve something, or are you trying to find solutions in terms of achieving 100-day agenda, or are you trying to find solutions for the country in this summit?
First of all, Anish, let me say that there's been a lot of misconception about what this summit is all about. Some people say, oh, it's about expenditure and revenue. Some people say it's about formulating a budget. Let me tell the people of this country very clearly and honestly. For 16 years, we had a style of government that was not based on consultation, that was not based on dialogue. A lot of things that happened, in the last, 15, 16 years, in terms of economic policy agenda, in terms of social agenda, in terms of our foreign policy, in terms of our regional architecture. So all this put together, including education. We never had an opportunity. So the last summit that was held was probably before the 2006 coup. So this is an attempt to bring people together and to look at how we can move into the future, not just the next 1 year, not just the next 2 years, probably for the next 10 years, how we can transform our economy, how we can transform our country into a more productive, sustainable, efficient, system that will take us well into the future. So, and I must say that the response has been overwhelming. In fact, we can't accommodate everybody who wants to come. And I understand that, because that means that people were starved of, deprived of this kind of consultation where they feel free, where they want to contribute. And so what the objective of this summit is precisely to set a long-term agenda for the country, to listen to the people, listen to those who have a lot of good ideas but never had an opportunity to articulate it. So the summit is not about just looking at expenditure and revenue. That's the job of the Fiscal Review Committee. Summit is not just formulating a budget. It's a much bigger agenda, and this is in line with the coalition government's well-known philosophy of governance, that is through dialogue and consultation.
So have comments from Mr. Mahendra Chaudhry and Savinathan Narume frustrated you?
Well, nothing frustrates me. People are grateful. People are telling us that the transparency and the accountability which this government has shown, the fact that we made that public, we wanted to say to the people very clearly, this is what is going to be an estimated budget. This is what will come from the sponsors. This is what will be paid. We are transparent about how many times in the last 16 years you have had an opportunity as a reporter in Fiji Times, as a member of the media, opportunity to find out how much was being spent on government programs held in some of the best hotels around the country. We are different. We want to be transparent. And we are very happy that it created a debate. In fact, it gave us so much good publicity, in terms of what the summit is going to be about. People have been free, the media has been free to talk about, and some of those, politicians who may be irrelevant now, they also had an opportunity to raise their views. So we're not disturbed by that. We are very, very pleased that as a government, we are setting a new era. People are getting sensitized. People are actually wondering how they are able to now criticize the government, say things to the Minister for Finance or the Prime Minister, because we have created that free environment. And so we are actually happy with the engagement of our people in the way that they have discussed this.
Is Mr. Chaudhry irrelevant to the country in terms of politics now?
Why are you focusing on Mr. Chaudhry? Mr. Chaudhry, I mean, he can do his bit. That's fine. I don't want to get. I don't want to respond to garbage, that might be coming from him every now and then.
So is he irrelevant to Fiji's politics?
Well, you can ask him.
Moving on, the outcomes of the National Economic Summit. People might say, will it be actioned immediately, or will it become a document that will lie on somebody's table and become part of a long pipeline that will not see the end of it?
So I can say a little bit on that. Precisely not. What we are saying, what we have planned to do, and we will be announcing that this would be not something that will just stop after the 2-day summit. We are going to set up a permanent secretariat for a summit, for thematic working groups. The thematic working groups will continue. We want them to continue to look at what has been achieved over the years. So if we come back next year, there would be some reports, there would be some thinking about what has happened. These ideas were put forward. How far have we gone? So we see this as a continuous inclusive process of governance under this government, and so it is not going to be a talk fest, that will be left, after people live in the hotel rooms and hotel venues. This is something that we have planned well. Our staff have worked very hard. In fact, the amount of preparation that has gone into this summit, the preparation of thematic papers, we're not just going there in the, we're not a government where we call people and we go and, make a PowerPoint presentation and tell the people off and then we go. This is a summit where people have been given, all the participants will have the thematic papers, the background papers. So if you're talking about transportation, a lot of thinking, research has gone there. These are papers for discussion, and people going through that will then come out and say, look, we should add this is not right. So the preparation for the summit has been, and staff in the ministry have gone over and above the other work commitments to actually do this. So I want to actually take this opportunity to thank the staff of the Ministry of Finance who worked so hard to bring this summit to fruition, and I'm very confident that the next 2 days would be really, really exciting for the people of this country.
The outcome of the summit, the fiscal review report, then the national budget. How will these three documents gel together for the budget that you will present?
Well, we are not only looking at 3 documents, Anish. I mean, we are first of all, these are fiscal review committee again. The last fiscal review committee was set up in 2004. This is another achievement of this government, where we have set up this important committee of experts who are looking at that, who are looking at expenditure policies, revenue policies, tax policies, and they will provide the report. So that all these reports are going to be useful, because we are trying to, and the World Bank report that just came out, it has vindicated what we were saying for 8 years in opposition, about borrowing and spending, about reckless, expenditure. And the World Bank report, I'm not saying that, it's a World Bank expert saying what happened to the economy, what happened to the expenditure. And of course they are making their recommendations, but the point is that the government will eventually decide. We will read all these reports, we will analyze all those reports, we will take into account people's submission, we will look at IMF Article 4 reports. So all these reports will be studied by our ministry and government as a whole, so that we end up doing the right thing. That is the new approach that this government has brought, and that approach will serve the country well, serve the people of Fiji well, because we will be making good, informed, well thought out policies.
Under this new reform, under this new type of negotiation, if the opposition, members of opposition do not come to the summit, will you consider that to be a boycott on their part?
Well, I mean, you have to ask them. We have sent them our invitation. I'm sure there are a lot of sensible people out there, and I'm looking forward to seeing them. I've sent individual letters to all of them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prasad. We'll take a small break and continue the discussion on the other side.
We were around when the deed was first signed. We were around when the first car engine roared. We were around when the very first was crowned. Through devastations, jubilant celebrations, and the milestones. We will continue to be around to bring you all the stories first.
Welcome back, and the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Professor Biman Prasad, is with me today, and we are talking about the National Economic Summit and the economy at large. Mr. Prasad, let's talk about the wastage of public funds that you have mentioned many times. Have you discovered any specific wastage of public funds of a high scale, which you have tackled recently, or you are about to tackle in the coming weeks?
Well, there are a number of examples that I can give, Anish. In fact, the World Bank expenditure review has pointed out many areas where expenditure was wasted. They're not using the same language. But I can give you just examples of policies that led to wastage. For example, this rebate for the audio-visual industry, for investors who come and make movies. We have basically given taxpayers' money. We've taken out taxpayers' money and given it to these producers at a rate which is unbelievable. We have wasted almost $400 million. In fact, we paid $235 million already. The balance will have to be paid by the government. That's a commitment that has been made. Imagine $400 million. Then we have pointed out a number of other areas, allocations of budget to things like Walesi. We've looked at expenditure in infrastructure, wastage. Look at the campus that was supposed to be built in Lambasa. Look at the Lotoka swimming pool. Look at the Govind Park. There are also wastages when they took and spent millions of dollars to build this hospital in Navosa, which is almost like a white elephant. So there are a number of ways in which wastage took place, mismanagement, lack of priority areas, corruption, generous, rebates, concessions. In terms of, capital projects, we are reviewing all this. So the auto-visual industry rebate and concession, that's already being reviewed, and we want to look at, how best we can support these industries, but not through giving, handouts and using the taxpayers' money.
With the overseas filming in Fiji, if you saw the films that were made in Fiji on the big screen, the name of the former Attorney General was on the big screen, the logo of the Fijian government was on the big screen. Wouldn't you want to see that?
Well,
your name before movie commences?
We are a government which would not be grandstanding. This is, and that's a very good example, Anish, of all this grandstanding. Of trying to make themselves look good. They were spending taxpayers' money to make themselves look good, and we're not going to do that. We are very conscious of what had happened, and it's always important to look back when you're looking forward. So that we don't make the same kind of mistakes that has been made in the last 15 or 16 years.
If I gave you an option to build roads or take Fijians out of poverty, what would you do first?
In fact, both are a priority. There are certain areas where you need to maintain roads, even build roads. What had happened in the last 15, 16 years, there was this show going on. I mean, you see the repair work in urban areas, but you look at some of the rural roads where the economic lifeblood is there, where people need that. So we are going to focus on priority areas where we can support, because to get people out of poverty, you need economic infrastructure, you need people to have access to be able to get to the market and back home. But getting rid of poverty, looking at social welfare issues, targeting our expenditure would be a big priority, and you will see some of those in the coming budget.
The World Bank report states the VAT on non-essential items be brought back. Is that something that can be done, or will you do that?
All I want to say is that the World Bank report is their report. They've done the analysis, they're making recommendations. So will the Fiscal Review Committee. At the end of the day, we as a government will decide what tax structure we have, what rate we have, how that will impact on our people, especially the poor. So all that will be considered before we make any decision. So the recommendation by the World Bank doesn't mean that we are going to do that.
Okay. So you want to reassure the poor people in the country, do not be alarmed, in other words?
I want to assure all the people of this country, the misinformation that took place, that was given to them before the election, that their social welfare will be gone, their scholarships will be gone, nothing of that sort will happen. In fact, those critics who are saying things about expenditure have not once talked about the fact that as soon as we came into government, we prioritized, we looked at expenditure that was not necessary, that we felt would be wasted. We took out $100 million. Out of that, we allocated $50 million to provide back to school support for every kid, from preschool right up to high school. And it was a very timely, it was not before an election, it was just after an election, after we became a government. We provided the support, and throughout the country, people appreciated that. We have extended the bus fare subsidy, and we are seriously looking at how to address and make sure that our people are looked after. So let me assure the people, don't be alarmed. Don't be carried away by mischief makers, those who did it before the election, and some of them are doing it after the election. The government is firmly focused on looking after all our people.
You are a vocal critic of government borrowing, national debt, so to say. In your 100 days or so, have you borrowed money from somebody? No,
I mean, as we said, we didn't have a revised budget or mini budget. We have redeployed funds from the existing budget. If you look at the World Bank report is very clear. They're saying that Fiji's debt problem started well before COVID, and we knew that. We were telling the people of this country and telling the government, rein in your expenditure, don't go on this extravagance. So by 2019, coming out of the 2018 election, where they went on a spending spree, the economy was already under stress, it was contracting. So when COVID hit, if we didn't have the support from Australia and New Zealand in terms of budget support, if we didn't borrow more, we would be in a dire situation. So that's what we have been landed with. So our plan, Anish, in the next 3 to 5 years, would be to bring the debt to GDP ratio down to about 70%, and in the next 10 to 12 years, we are looking at bringing back to a level of 50%. I mean, if you look at countries like New Zealand, even after COVID, their debt to GDP ratio is 20%, because they ran a very responsible fiscal agenda. We didn't have any space. Our debt level was already high. So when COVID hit us, we had no option to borrow more, and if we are not supported by the Australia, New Zealand, and through remittances, we'd be in a very difficult situation.
So my question remains: have you borrowed while you've been in office?
No, there is no new borrowing as yet. But going into the future, while we are reducing our debt level, while we are trying to grow our economy, raise our revenue, there would be areas where we would probably still need borrowing, but that will be prudent. That will be within the ambit of our own fiscal strategy. So all that borrowing and lending and readjustment will continue, but with the overall objective of bringing everything down.
One final question before we have a break. I think I'll ask this question on behalf of the whole of the media industry in Fiji.
Yeah.
Will you deliver your budget address in the night or daytime?
It will be delivered at the daytime. We want to give the media, we want to have media to have a lock-up session, have a good lead time to be able to analyze the budget, look at it and cover in the print media or radio and television effectively. No more night delivery of budgets.
Thank you very much.
We were around when the deed was first signed. We were around when the first car engine roared. We were around when the very first was crowned. Through devastations, jubilant celebrations, and the milestones. We will continue to be around to bring you all the stories first.
Welcome back, and the final session with the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Professor Biman Prasad. A very pointed question to you, Mr. Prasad. Have you found cases of fraud in the ministry or in government that is very much on the lines of corruption and fraud that could be referred to criminal authorities?
That is a matter that is being dealt with through various investigations. So I won't want to dwell on that at this stage.
You'll be able to mention which ministries?
No, not really, because we are still trying to get through some of these things, and at an appropriate time, we will reveal all this.
What about corruption? Cases of corruption?
Well, I mean, you can judge it for yourself. Some of the information that we have provided, in terms of conflict of interest, in terms of people who are on the boards, these are all matters out there in the public, and it's for people to judge whether they were engaging in corrupt practices. Any criminal element, of course, will be dealt by the appropriate authorities.
While you have been in the office, has anyone approached you for a major favor in return for something?
No. People have come to see me. We are open, we want to talk to our businesses, we want to assure our investors. And let me say this, as we said before the election, that when we come into government, we are not going to be a vindictive government. We want to work with everybody. We don't care whether you were having dinner with the people in the previous government or opposition or whatever. That's not the criteria on which we are going to use to determine our economic policy agenda. And I can assure the people, the investors and everyone out there in the country that we as a government, as a ministry, as a minister, I am open to discussion and views and criticism from our people.
What's your message then to people who might want to influence decision of the government?
No, I think people have the right to articulate their views. People have the right to show their influence. I mean, if people come to the economic summit and come up with an idea and argue that this idea is a good idea, that is something worth pursuing. That's not corruption. That's lobbying for your idea. That's influencing your ideas into government policy. There is nothing wrong in that, and that we welcome people to come up with their suggestions and ideas, and it's up to the government whether we get influenced by that or not. That's how we will deal with it.
The World Bank report states 9.3 billion is needed in the next 10 years to
9.3
billion.
Yeah.
For the next 10 years to get Fiji out of danger of climate change. Where will that investment come from?
Well, that's a very good question, Anish. I've just come back from the World Bank IMF spring meetings, and one of the key discussions that I had with in the number of forums was climate financing. Obviously, the commitment by the developed countries to allocate $100 billion has not been met. We still haven't got the loss and damage fund. What we are saying to the developed countries, we need funding for adaptation. all our infrastructure, whether we talk about roads, water supply, electricity, hospital, education, these have to be climate resilient. And so as a country, as a small island state, as an important country in the Pacific, we will have to leverage, climate change funding in a big way. We need to build capacity within our government. We need to be able to say to the international funding agencies, like Climate Adaptation Fund, Global Environmental Facility, these are funds. But right now it's very difficult to access this funding, even if they are available. So that aspect of financing, plus our own ability to raise funding by growing our economy, by having a good tax revenue, plus a mix of borrowing and our ability to put into a good package so that in the next 10 years we are able to access financing to be able to do some of these things.
Is an economic collapse still possible for the country?
No, I am confident that the way we are in a difficult situation, but there is no room for alarm. I think since this government has come in, there is a sense of renewed confidence, there is a sense of exuberance. We are looking at renewed interest from investors. Of course, there are international headwinds. If economies of Australia and New Zealand don't do well, we could, through transmission mechanism, either through remittances or tourist numbers, we could be affected. But right now, we are on a good economic trajectory of recovery. So going forward, what we want to do is to make sure that while we consolidate our fiscal position, we actually don't disrupt the recovery as well. So we have to tread carefully and create a delicate balance, and I intend to do that from the next budget and in the following 2 or 3 budgets that I will be delivering.
Do you want to be remembered as the good Minister for Finance or the best Minister for Finance for the country?
Well, ministers of finance, they get the bouquet, but they also get the brick. And I'm not here to set a record for myself, in terms of good or bad. I'm here to do the right thing, and the right thing would be to bring the country back with a fiscal consolidation strategy so that it's sustainable, that we provide a good trajectory of economic growth which is sustainable, that we are able to, as a result of that, collect good revenue, but also use that revenue to improve the quality of lives of our people, and I want to be remembered for that.
If tomorrow you need to speak to the former finance minister on an issue that was under his purview, will you invite him to your office?
Well, as I said, I'm not the sort of guy who doesn't want to talk to people. I have a very different kind of disposition, and I feel that I have the ability to talk to anyone, including those who would be perceived as my enemies, or those who would consider me as the enemies. I don't see myself in this role as having enemies or friends where I can't deal with. I'm pretty relaxed about it, whether it's a former Minister of Finance, whether it's a former Prime Minister, or it's a former anyone. And we're talking to many of them who are in Parliament, and there are some good people right now in the opposition, who understand, that where we are as a country, and I'm sure they are all willing to help. And we, obviously in Parliament, we will have robust debates, but I'm confident that given the approach that we have taken as a government, we would be able to work with the opposition to take the country forward.
Managing the national coffers, is that your personal passion currently?
It's a job that I have to do, and it's a job that the Prime Minister has entrusted me with. It's a job that the people of Fiji have entrusted me with, and I will do that with the best of my ability. And I'm confident that in the last 3 months, what we've done, how we have steered everything in the country, as far as the economy is going, we are surely setting a new standard and a foundation that the fruits of which may not be seen tomorrow, but will definitely be there.
As Minister for Finance, are you comfortable with the workings of the number one FIRCA, Fiji Revenue Customs Service? Are you comfortable with their current functions and their current deliveries?
Well, I wouldn't say that I'm comfortable with different entities, or I won't use that word comfortable. What I will say is that a lot of them need to step up. A lot of them need to look at how things were done in the past, and we are working with those organizations, including FRCS. They are going back to hiring some more people, the experienced people. There was this haphazard redundancy, without clear thinking, during COVID, and we lost some very, very experienced staff from there. So we need to, and I think the current board, the new chairman, Mr. Malakai Nyanga, I have confidence in the CEO and those who are leading the board to be able to bring those changes as quickly as possible, so that FRCS, which is an important arm of the Ministry of Finance and government as a whole, is up to speed and does collect the appropriate revenue that we need.
What about the Reserve Bank of Fiji?
All, as I said, Anish, all the institutions are under my responsibility. We have a very good working relationship. I have confidence in the people who are there, and of course, as I said, there is always room to improve things, to build on, and to change things that were not working. So that applies to every organization that I would deal directly with.
Has the current governor indicated that he's staying on or moving away?
No, I mean, I'm comfortable with if I can use the word comfortable with the current governor. I think he's doing his job, and that's where I'll leave it.
Mr. Prasad, thank you very much for speaking with us.
Pleasure.
And we wish you all the best with the Economic Summit.